right. I'd like to call this meeting of the Region 12 Board of Education to order. Welcome, everyone, December 16, 2013. Thank you for coming. I will take attendance. Oh, I'm sorry. Susan, would you take attendance?
Thank you. Valerie Anderson.
Valerie will not be here tonight.
Tony.
No.
Alan.
Yes.
Greg.
Here.
Michelle.
Here.
Emily.
Here.
James.
Yes.
Kelly. Jennifer.
Here.
Michael.
Here.
I am here. Peter.
Okay, so we're all here.
No, I can't hear. These old people, where?
Peter's here. All right, so we're all here except Valerie and Kelly. I'm very excited to announce the item 2 on our agenda, a holiday musical performance by the Chippewa Valley Middle School 7th grade string ensemble. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Jason Malley. Jason?
Thank you. We're going to start this evening with traditional favorite, Joy to the World. And now we're going to play our feature piece, which is a medley of 2 Christmas carols. What are they? Up on a Housetop and Jolly Old St. Nicholas. And it's a very clever arrangement that is really appropriate for this group. This is, I'm proud to say, only their 2nd year of playing. And it's phenomenal what they're doing. And this piece features 2 distinct styles in string playing, bowing and plucking. And the musical term for plucking, of course, is pizzicato. And this medley is called Pizzicato Holiday.
Jason, thank you very much, and to the seventh graders, thank you. It was wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations. All right, well, now that we're all in the mood, goodwill, yes, Alan?
I'd like to have a quick vote to add to the agenda under old business 8.1. We have another policy that was omitted from the agenda. If you recall, we wanted to delete the smoking cessation policy, 513165. And we weren't sure whether that could be done in one or two readings or not because it was just a deletion, but we're here for the second reading on that. I'd like to add second reading, policy 513165, smoking cessation, deletion of the policy to the agenda as 8.2. I'm sorry.
Is there a second to that motion?
There's a second.
All right. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, the agenda is amended. Thank you, Alan. Item 3, consent agenda. Is anyone who wants to speak on the consent agenda? Which are the minutes of the December 2nd, 2013 meeting. All right, seeing no one, the consent agenda is approved. Thank you. Report of the chair. I do have two things tonight. One I'm going to speak on now. I don't want to get into a lengthy discussion on it, but hopefully we can make it an item for a future meeting. And then I have another item that may be a little more involved, so I'd like to hold it to, I'm going to hold it till after item 9, I'm sorry, after 8.2, before opportunity for the public to comment on agenda items. The first item is, it's been brought to my attention with regard to the building and facilities committees that they suffer from lack of board representation. We had a separate building committee, a ad hoc building committee with regard to the initial investigation with regard to the building issues before the district now. There's been no representative, no board representative from the town of Bridgewater on that committee. I have made a decision to terminate the building committee, the ad hoc building committee, and instead have the facilities committee, the board's facilities committee, take over that charge until such time as there's a referendum. If a referendum and a building project passes, I will, if I'm still the chair at that time, I will appoint a permanent building committee to go forward from there. But at this time, I'm going to disband the building committee. Mr. Tony Amato had been a citizen member of that committee, and the committee's been now disbanded. And there is some concern about the small representation of the board on these committees and how it is hard to get anything consensus because of the small board representation. And I'm just making these comments. We can discuss this at some other point. There's been an issue or a question raised as to the advisability of having members of the general public on board committees and also members of staff on board committees other than in an advisory capacity. So I just wanted to bring that up, that these are issues that have been brought to my attention, and the issue with regard to the disbanding of the building committee and making it a function of the facilities committee, which is in operation, does have representation of board members from all three towns. So I think that's just the way to go, and there'll be no members of the public on that committee. All right? So I wanted to bring that up. I do have another item, but I'll bring it up before item 9. All right, superintendent's report.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Happy holidays. Happy to see you all. Just a couple of announcements. Last year, if you recall, we had one student who received all 5s on their CAPS, which is the 10th grade Connecticut Performance Assessment. This year we have 5 students. I have not publicly told them yet. I have their letters. I'm going to hopefully see them tomorrow or Wednesday and deliver them in person. But I just want to let you know who they were. It is Rachel Crosley, James Hagan, Samuel Nast, Sebastian Taylor, and Sarah Kaba. So congratulations. We're very, very proud of those 5 students. They have been recognized by the commissioner, and it really is a wonderful feat to get all 5s on those assessments. So I just wanted to let you know, we are making great progress in that area.
If I may, I'm sorry, I think that deserves a round of applause. Congratulations to those students, that's
Yes.
wonderful.
We had an appointment. Sarah Osborne is the secretary in guidance for the secretary that now has was elected in Washington, so we'll see what happens there. I want to let you know, because I know this is going to be hitting the papers, and I'm going to be sharing it with our community, but some of you know, when I was hired, the chairman said, we want Region 12 on the map. So I said, okay, yes you did, you said that. And then I won a trip, a Life Touch memory trip to go build a school in Costanza, sure. There you go. Costanza in the Dominican Republic. And so I am going January 21st to the 28th. I am going in the next 2 weeks to get the kids all revved up to help us. My trip is all paid, but any monies that I do raise will go towards the school for supplies and bricks and mortar, et cetera, We're going to have a Google chat on Friday, January 24th, here in the building, where I will be on the big screen. We're going to try to get as many of the students in the auditorium, parents, whoever, so you can see what we're doing, and I'm really excited about it. So if you'd like to, you can donate, and I'm not asking certainly for everybody to donate a lot, but if I figured if everybody I know donates $10, that would be a lot of money to help. And I think it would be a great thing, and we are going to get press, because they're going to do press releases, and so yeah, so I'm really excited about it. It really is, you know, we are not in charge of building. There are engineers, there are construction guys, we assist them. And then we also, one day, we take pictures. On the Friday, we take pictures of the kids, and then Life Touch flies it to their office in Minneapolis, and then somebody actually flies the pictures down and we give them to the kids before they leave. I'm also allowed to bring supplies and stuff, so I'll bring an extra suitcase full of whatever I can get, and after Christmas shopping, and I'm really excited about it, and I think it's going to be good. I'm going to see if I can get the kids involved, because it's just a great, worthwhile cause.
I'm sorry, Pat, when you say, you said that you're going to try to get the kids revved up and get the kids involved, you're talking about Chicago students?
Yes, yeah, Chicago and the elementary schools too.
Okay.
So even if we do pennies for Costanza or something, I want to talk, I have a meeting with the principals on Wednesday.
It's not Cosentino? That's not the name of the town?
No, not yet, maybe when I come back.
When are you going?
January 21st to the 28th. So it's really exciting. It's an exciting thing. It's kind of like a Habitat for Humanity run through Life Touch, and it's going to be a great opportunity to have people and educators from all over the country and even some international. So it would be great to make some connections with other principals and do some things with the kids, and you know, I'm really excited.
Pat, are you working with the Spanish teachers too for that connection?
You know what, I'm going to. Yeah, we're right now getting everything in place and going to move forward. So yeah, I think it's going to be wonderful. Yeah. So, okay, so that is my report.
All right.
Fantastic.
Any questions? All right, thank you. And item 6, education. 6.1, school performance index and district performance index report from Mr. Brito. Teresa?
This is just a little information. This is a change in the law where they're no longer doing adequate yearly progress. They're now doing school performance index and districts. So Teresa's going to share that information with you.
I have a sample. As I explain it, it might be helpful to actually view
You also
it.
have it in your packet, too.
You all have the released information for all schools in the district. As Dr. Cosentino just stated, the old format of annual yearly progress caused a lot of angst and confusion for educators because there was this difficult formula, and so if you really wanted to figure out how you did, you really couldn't. They would just tell you how you did. The state came up with a very simplified manner, all based on individual performance index. Every single student has an individual performance index. So the sample in front of you, if a student reaches goal, so they have goal or advanced, they get 100% credit. If they're proficient in one of the areas tested, that counts as 67. If they're basic, they're only getting a third of the credit, 33, and if they calculate it as below basic, then there is no credit provided. They also have a rating for the skills checklist, that is students that are not able to take the traditional CMT or the modified assessment, and those categories range from independent, proficient, and basic, and again, if the student is independent, their rating is 100, proficient is 50, and if it's basic, there's no credit there. And what the state does is they will calculate every single student in a grade in a school. So the sample that's in front of you, the sample of 5th graders, 13 students, and I looked at each student's performance. So if a student met goal in math, they got 100. Student 1 in reading, it was proficient, they received a 67. In writing, goal or advanced, 100. Science, goal or advanced, 100. And then we average that out, and the individual performance index for student 1 in the sample I just gave you is a 92. And what happens there is, as we calculate all of that, for each grade in a school, then the whole average is taken. So I was able to verify that this, in fact, does result in Burnham's score of 95.5, which categorized them in excelling, because not only did they rate highly, but at least 25% of the students were in advance for each of the areas tested. You need to be in advance for 3 out of the 4. If you have 25% of your population being in advanced, then you are classified in excelling. Now the state does have a goal target of 88. And so this example is Burnham. They did have 95.5 as their school performance index. For Booth, their school performance index, again, same system for developing and calculating, came out to a 93.7. However, they did not have the 3 categories of students meeting 25% in the advanced, and that's why they are in the progressing. They met goal, and it was high enough to have a 93.7, but they did not meet the percentage required out of the 3 of the 4 areas tested in order to meet that. The middle school,
Washington Primary.
I'm so sorry. That's next in my order here. Washington Primary received a score of 90, so they did meet the target of 88, and they did have 25% of the students meeting the advanced category, which then also put them in the rating of excelling school. Now let's go to the middle. The middle school received a school performance index of 91.4. In all of the areas tested, they had well over 25% meeting advanced. However, because the entire school is tested, the subgroup population of students with disabilities is greater than the number of 20, and that subcategory did not meet the criteria that the state has. That's why it is progressing. Whereas in the elementary schools, they do not have a population that is tested of over 20 students for any of their subgroups. So I just want to clarify that, why the school is identified as progressing. The high school received a school performance index of 84.1. They did meet the criteria for over 25% being in the advanced. However, the state also looks at the graduation rate. And so they look at the percent of students that are able to graduate with their cohort in just 4 years. So if a student has an extended school year, they may say beyond 4 years, but in a way, it's like the school is penalized for that, and that brings down the school's performance index. But there's definite progress since last year. It did increase, and that school is classified as transitioning.
So it's also transitioning because its overall SBI is between 64 and 87.
That's another criteria. And in high school, keep in mind, it is only 10th grade that was assessed on the CMT, so it's strictly based on the capped results. That's why there are 2 different results for the district performance index. There is a CMT district score of 91.5, and then there is a capped district score, because they do calculate those differently, of 83.5. The other thing you should note is that if the district has students that are outplaced, how those students perform are calculated in a part of the district performance index.
Are there any questions for Teresa? I'm sure it's
You
here,
have all the
but
reports if you have any questions.
with regard to the high school, you said that although it's only the 10th grade that's figured into the score, the graduation rate of the
Graduation
entire
is a
school,
big part.
where is that in the graduation? I mean, how many students are not, percentage of students are not graduating with their peer on time?
It's right here, it's graduation rate.
Right here,
They
86.
don't have it yet, but it's
You have
last year and the year
attachments
before.
there?
Okay, all right.
You found that?
A
Okay.
lot of the graduation rate has to do with students who don't finish in 4 years. So if you have for an example, a special needs student who we keep until 21, they're counted as not graduating with their cohort. So we're being penalized, as is the rest of the state, and it's not just us. We're being penalized because those students are saying many times till they're 21. And then supposedly the state will go back once they graduate and take them out of that number. But at that point, it's already, 3 and 4 years down the pipe. So that's part of the issue. The other piece that you should know, this is hooked into the new teacher evaluation and the new principal evaluation. And they are rated, part of their rating is based on the SPI in the districts. So, for example, the administrators at the high school, part of their evaluation is based on improving that graduation rate. So everything is tied together. I know it doesn't always seem like it is, but it is all tied together, trying to raise student achievement for all students. And I do also want to say, I'm really very proud of all of the schools, but especially the elementary schools. All 3 of them did very, very well. Washington Primary rose to an excelling school, which I think is fabulous. And I know that Emily Judd is here, and her and her staff deserve a lot of congratulations, as do Burnham, which is again a school of distinction, which is wonderful. And Booth Free is progressing, but it's not because of lower scores. As you can see, their scores were even a little bit higher than Washington, but because they didn't meet that 75% piece, 25%, that's why they were in progressing. But all of our schools, when you look at them, have excellent student achievement, and that is due to wonderful staff and wonderful teachers. And the middle school did a great job, and the high school also. Everybody's working hard, and everybody's mind is moving in the same direction of improving student achievement. So I think these are really good reports, and they're a great baseline to continue to improve.
Okay. Any questions? Michael?
Can we expect major changes to this school performance report next year based on the fact that we're going to have new assessments?
Yes, we don't know what that's going to look like just yet, but you are correct. There are going to be changes coming. One other piece I wanted to add about the high school in particular is that if a student leaves the school because they're going to go to a private school, for example, and a public school doesn't pick them up, and we do not have knowledge that they have gone to a private school, the state will look at that as a dropout. And so we are really trying very hard to account for every student so that there isn't that type of misrepresentation. And that will bring down the school's performance index as well.
All right. Michelle?
Well, kind of on that note, I just don't remember in the past us talking about our graduation rate being an issue. Although 15% not graduating with their class, I think probably is an issue, and clearly the state thinks it is. So I don't know if you have a sense, Teresa, of how much of that might be error because it's untracked people moving out, or because it's a special needs student staying. I mean,
I think a lot of it is has to do with our special needs population, because we do have a lot of students with significant needs who do not graduate in 4 years. The other piece is that I think as a region, we have to really be diligent in making sure that we collect data and input data in a way that is always correct. So that's another piece that we have to look at. And then the other piece is that we do have some students who, need that extra year or extra 6 months. But when you have such small cohorts of students, 2 or 3 students can really, make the number go one way or another. So that's also another piece of it. But we are definitely on top of it, as I said, with the new evaluations, that you cannot get away from the fact anymore that you have to be looking at student data, student achievement, and making sure that all students are progressing. So you can't get away from that.
okay, thank you.
Anyone else? No.
There's always a lot of talk about rankings in the DIRB. Do you know how each of these schools ranked in the DIRB?
They don't publicize that at all. We just have how CMT and capped how we performed it, but they stopped really looking at the DIRB now.
Really?
Yeah.
They don't show it. Oh.
We have to ask that question. I wonder if we can still figure that out. We'll have to.
Probably manually.
But we haven't gotten it.
I had one school, like, which one should I do? I know exactly which one.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. All right. I'm going to amend what I said before. I had an item that I wanted to bring up. I said I was going to do it after old business, but I think this is a good point to bring it up in anticipation of our next item on the agenda, which is the report from the presentation from Fletcher Thompson and Arcadis. And the item I wanted to bring up was in response to the issue raised by Kelly. I'm sorry she's not here to hear this. The question was, are we in a lawful position to be spending money to come up with cost estimates before we have a vote on the issue of should the region be amended or not? I've spoken to our attorney, and the way he's explained it to me is, first of all, you cannot have the issue of should the region be amended and a project for a certain cost in the same question, because they are, as Alan has, I think, previously pointed out, 2 different groups of voters who can vote on that question. The voters who can vote on the issue of should the region be amended are residents of the towns. The same people who can vote who vote in November here. They can vote for selectmen, they can vote for president, senator. So you have to be a resident of one of these 3 towns, a registered voter, and a resident of these towns to vote on the issue of whether the plan should be amended. So if you live primarily out of state and you have a second home here, you can only vote in one place. So wherever your primary residence is, wherever you're registered to vote, those folks can vote on the issue of whether the regional plan can be amended. Whether a bonding referendum should be passed to spend money to construct a project can be voted on by those folks who are taxpayers in the region. If you own more than $1,000 of taxable property in the region, in one of the towns, you can vote on that question. Now, you can only vote in one town. If you have property in Bridgewater and Roxbury, somehow you can only vote in one town. Most of those people would probably be the same people, but there may be some who meet one criteria but not the other. They are not residents, but they're taxpayers, so if they're not residents, they couldn't vote on the amended question, but they could vote on the dollars question. And so we will have to decide. With that said, we could have a referendum with it would take 2 ballots, quite frankly. People would, in the way we're voting now, at least in Washington, I know we get to have a machine vote that you put a slide in the machine, and I've been told that you could be handed 2 ballots. They would have to check you, and you would decide if you got 2 ballots or 1 ballot, and if one, which one did you get? It could be done that way, or we could decide, I think would be preferable, or we could decide to just vote on the regionalization, the amendment of the regional plan issue, with the information that we've developed on cost numbers as information over here on the side. This is what we intend to do, but not put that to a vote. I don't think that's as good as an idea, but our attorney said that's a possibility. So the bottom line is, I don't think that we're doing anything improper or illegal by developing these numbers for, and our attorney agreed with me. I'm agreeing with our attorney. He was the one who told me that in developing this information for presentation to the public, we're within our bounds to do that. It would just take 2 separate ballots to vote on. It's going to have to be on 2 separate questions. So I don't want to get into a lengthy discussion because I don't want to hold these folks up, but Peter.
The motion that I put on the floor several weeks ago is the correct motion. And that's the way I believe we should go.
We don't need to decide that tonight.
Right.
But we're going to have to operate within those guidelines. Okay? All right, so with that said.
With that said, I know they're here somewhere, but we have our architects here. I saw Dan. Are they still here? I told them it probably was not till about 7:45, but. Oh, no. We'll find them. Okay, so anyway, they're coming. Dan Casanelli is from Fletcher Thompson. And his group, with a representative with O&G, who's working with Arcadis, and our project manager, presented in each of the 3 towns. I was present for 2. I couldn't make the Roxbury one, but they had very interesting conversations. And they are here tonight to present to the board their findings, because I think they found some interesting information, and to give you an overview of what's going on, and then to have really a discussion with the board. Any questions you want answers, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm happy they're here. So, Dan, this is Dan, everyone. Dan is from...
Dan, why don't you come out front?
Oh,
a little bit, yeah. There we
Whoever's
go.
going to make the presentation, just
They're all-
introduce yourself and then you're
Yeah.
on.
So you're on. You're all on.
We did put together a little PowerPoint presentation,
That'd be
so
great.
as soon as we get that loaded, we'll.
We can give you a minute.
No pressure.
I do want to say while they're setting up that one of our goals was to really get as much done before the holiday. And that's why we set up meetings and met with staff and the communities before the holiday break, so that we could get some information and work under our
So
belts.
we presented up on board.
So,
The boards I just put up here, you'll see, we have them in PowerPoint form, so, because I have a hard time even seeing that, so we'll project it up on the screen.
is it working?
Sorry.
Oh, okay, good, just making
It was running
sure.
earlier, I guess.
It was on and then it went off. Karen's here if we need her.
Well, while we're waiting, I'm going to introduce
There you go.
our team. Mike Bergers, our K-12 studio design leader. Angela Cahill is our project manager. Beavis Nagardi-Laker back here is an assistant project manager. He's helped us on a number of projects in the past, so we've got him involved as well. And Ken Diego from O&G. Nick Macy is on his way, and said he was going to be here at 7:45, so we'll have to see if he shows up.
There's no password.
Yeah, they were great when they were.
Don, do you know who logged in earlier? I'm sorry? Do you know who logged in earlier? Before?
I only fired up the projector, I never opened the computer.
Oops, sorry.
Yeah, should we go through the policies?
Yeah. You want? Okay. About 500. 200 in the middle and 300 in the high school. Might be a little bit less, but that's close. What if we turn it off and go back on?
No, it's on, it's just booting up.
Oh, it's booting up?
Somebody shut it off.
Oh, okay. Like how it is all. Everybody's good? Wait, so for Christmas? You are? Oh. Your father? Okay.
All right, great.
Okay.
Again, thank you. On behalf of everybody at Fletcher Thompson, Arcadis, and O&G, thank you for having us tonight. We basically want to go through where we are with the project. We did some community information gathering sessions over the last 2 weeks, and I want to thank all those in the community that did show up for those sessions. Very informative, pro and con. We gathered the information. There's some things you'll see in the list here that we'll take that apply to the project itself. And then there's some things we talked about moving off into a parking lot, and there were some discussions at some of the meetings about some of the design elements that may go into a project. And we're a little early for that. We are gathering that information, but that's not really what we're trying to get. We're trying to get an understanding from the community, the needs, concerns, and so forth. So Angela's going to take us through the list of it would be these boards here that I'm sure you're tough to see that far away, but up on the board here. And then we'll talk about kind of a little bit of a summary of the things that kind of are similar between all three communities that are on the board, on these boards. And then we'll talk a little bit about the process, where we are, where we're going, and moving forward. So I'm going to turn it over to Angela.
Thanks, Dan. Angela Cahill, Fletcher Thompson. I've met several of you at the 3 community meetings. Nice to see you again, and welcome to the new folks. Again, as Dan mentioned, thank you so much for those of you that came out for feedback. Basically, what we were looking for at the 3 community meetings was feedback on what would you like to see, what are your concerns, what would be your wants, your priorities, and so forth with the new pre-K 5 school that would be located in this area. And that's part of the process that as designers and as we assist the district with programming for the building is very valuable feedback. We also meet with teachers, administrators as well, but it's important to hear directly from the community because every district is different. And through asking these questions over and over again with different groups in the community, priorities and wants and needs and concerns are able to surface, and it really gives us a feel for the uniqueness of this area and what we can hopefully integrate into the project as a unique pre-K through 5 school. So our charge is to develop a schematic design for referendum. The project would be for approximately 300 students, which is the smallest category according to the state of Connecticut for reimbursement rates. So we're talking about a very small elementary school. And we had a list of questions that were sort of thought-provoking, questions to get the creative juices flowing for those of you that came to the meetings. But we also had a lot of discussions about concerns about, elements that you have now in your elementary schools that you would want to see carried forward. Hopefully somehow in the new design, concerns on the specific site, and so forth. So as Dan mentioned, we have the list of all the comments that were written down, but what I'd like to do is generalize and talk more about some of the concepts that actually popped up at all the meetings, some of the common concepts that came up. So we do have this in PowerPoint format, and then we do have them printed on board. So those of you that want to come and actually look at the full list, you're welcome to do that. But I'm not going to go over, each of the lists. So in Bridgewater, what we did is we met with the group as a whole. I want to say there was about 45 or so people there. It was a little harder to get feedback from every single person there in the large group format, but we did have a lot of people speaking, and so we were able to gather some feedback there. I'll just summarize the meetings first and then go into some of the commonalities. In Washington, we met here in this room. We were able to split up into about 3 groups of say 10 to 15 or so. And again, we asked the same questions of each group, and then we compiled the notes from each of those. So I think we felt we heard from a few more people than the larger group meeting. And then with Roxbury as well, we had, Washington was 2 groups, I'm sorry, and Roxbury was 3 groups, again, of about 10 or 15 people each. And not all of the presentations were people from that town on their own. So for example, in Washington, we had folks from both Bridgewater and Roxbury the same. So it was nice that people were able to come to more than one as well and see that feedback. The other thing is we had people weren't stuck in one group. There were some people that sort of circulated around and were able to see feedback from different tables. So I'll go into some of the common topics. Strong community feel. This is by far the foremost element that was discussed. Obviously, it's a very sensitive topic, going from 3 elementary schools, each unique in their own town, to a regional elementary school. So there was a lot of discussion in each of the meetings of how that community feel would be maintained and how would it change coming from that neighborhood feel that you have in each of the schools. into a new regional pre-K. So there was quite a bit of discussion of, perhaps how the classrooms could be arranged. Would they be grouped? Would it be progressive per grade? How could the students really have that intimate atmosphere and that strong sense of community? Also with community was not just the student experience, but how could the new design really envelope the needs of the community itself? Community events happen at your local schools in your towns, and we recognize that that's a big part of what would happen at the regional school. So how could we as designers really be able to accommodate those community activities in your schools? Safety and security, obviously, again, a very high priority topic. This topic ranged from general concerns about just merely being able to improve the bus and pedestrian traffic, making sure people are physically safe, to discussions specifically about design in order to keep the building safe and locked down during the day and so forth, and design elements of the building that would really help to keep the staff and students safe. Cost-efficient design, very high topic as well. There was concern of the size of the school. How do we accommodate a supposed use of 300 students? But again, going to a regional school from 3 separate schools, we have enrollment projections, but there was definite concern over how could we design so as to not overbuild, but yet we don't want to underbuild either. We want to be able to provide for any expansion that might happen in the future. So a very excellent topic and something that we definitely want to address in the design. Spaces to support Common Core curriculum. Now, a lot of our questions were geared towards, wants and needs, such as, for example, what do you not have in your existing elementary school that might be something that the students or the community would look forward to in a regional school? There was a lot of thought on that. However, a lot of the groups, it came back to that the core of the students' education is their basic curriculum. These students are very high performing in the schools where they are, and that has to be maintained. Therefore, we have extracurricular activities that might be getting attention, or community activities or spaces that might support those things, but really the focus should be on the students' performance and the core educational needs of the students. Technology and sustainability. These were common threads as well. Obviously a need to have technology, and as technology develops in the future, that needs to be accommodated into the design. And sustainability. We had quite a few people mention things such as renewable resources. Is it possible within the budget to get off of fossil fuels? What else can we do with the building to make sure it's a healthy building with high indoor air quality, and a very high efficient building to lower your energy costs? So those were some of the common themes as well. Along with an indoor air quality is also the interior environment. A healthy environment for students is one that has natural light and views. So those were some other topics that were discussed as far as sustainability goes. And community use I mentioned already, but I'd just like to bring up some of the topics that were mentioned. There are obviously, your typical meetings such as, Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, PTA meetings, community presentations. Each of the meetings, we got feedback on the size of a community space, how many people might want to be accommodated, what type of stage or platform would be good for this space, and what space that would be adjacent to. We also talked about the use of the site. How would this site be able to accommodate community needs as well as the needs of the adjacent schools and the sharing between the two. And not just for sports, but also for nature, for walking trails, for gardening, those types of things that could be tied to curriculum, but they're also community uses. And then, a good segue, into the relationship with the middle and high school. There were varying opinions on how this new pre-K to 5 school would physically connect to the campus of the middle and high school. Would it be integrated? Or would it be set back a little, maybe be more on its own, so as to really give the elementary students a feel of that they have their own place here and they're not just part of a greater campus. So we had varying feedback there, and there'll be a lot more discussion that we need to have with the teachers, with the operations and maintenance staff. There'll be a lot of discussion that will go into this topic, and we really look forward to hearing more about this particular one. Okay.
Thank you. Just to give an update of where we are in the process, the design process. Again, we've had our information gathering input meetings. We've had a programming meeting with administrators and within the district to talk about programming the educational facility. And what we do, our next step really is to take the educational specification and create a space program based on the needs that are identified in the ed spec. So we're in the process of creating that right now. That actually becomes the footprint or the underlying diagram document that we use to prepare diagrams, adjacencies, sizes of things. So we take all that information that's in the ed spec and really start to pull all that information so that we can look and explore conceptual diagrams and concepts. Different types of how would we organize things within an educational facility? Adjacencies, do we want to keep our kindergartners and first grade, our pre-K and our kindergartners away from first graders to fifth graders? So sometimes we segregate or separate those classrooms with public spaces such as the media center, the gymnasium, and the cafeteria. We look at options such as a multi-story use building, whether it's 2 stories or a 1-story building. How does it sit on the site? How do we want to incorporate? One of the ideas we looked at was, you got that great pond down on the back of the site here, and how do we integrate the design of the building to use that as part of the curriculum and an educational tool for students as well? Or do we look at it, as I think Angela touched on it, do we look at other parts of the site? Do we look up at the baseball and softball fields, or up in the field back, towards the back of the building? Those are some of the things that we'll begin to study as now we're moving forward, gathering that information. The next steps after the space program is really to start to explore those concepts. Site investigation, we have to take a look and do some testing, see what's on the ground. We don't want to, we're going to hit rock or we're not going to hit rock. So there's some testing that's got to go on there. We start to look at some of the utilities available on the site. There's enough power coming up to the site. Those are all costs that need to be captured in the cost estimate. So we want to try to identify as many of those items in an estimate so that we have a good number to use for the community to understand what this project's actually going to cost. As I said, program the site in conjunction with the building design. Now we take the outline, the building design as it's starting to evolve, we put it on the site. Where are the site circulations? Where's the vehicular traffic versus the bus traffic? We really don't like people and vehicles crossing, so we design driveways, roadways, drop-off areas to really segregate pedestrian and vehicular traffic. So those are some of the things we start to design as we're developing conceptual design in the project. And then, as always, present to you the information that we design, what's behind some of the decisions, or what we're showing in the diagram. We want your input as we move along in the process here. So we'll take that information and really start to hone it down and finalize the conceptual design. Then our engineers start to get involved more heavily, where they're identifying building systems, types of structural systems, an evaluation of mechanical systems that make the best sense for the best bang for the buck. And really what we try to do, there's minimum standards that the state requires. Well, we always try to exceed those standards because we know that in the end, you've got to pay for these lights to be on, you've got to pay for the heat. So we try to find the most cost-effective, efficient systems to use in these buildings to help with the cost of running the building. Ultimately, what we do is we gather all this information and we prepare what we call a design narrative. And the design narrative really talks about the design approach, the elements within the design of the building. So it creates a comprehensive package that we can give to an estimator so they can estimate the cost of the work. And then what we do is, once we get that cost back, we do an analysis and an evaluation of that cost, and we work together as a team with our program managers and the estimators to really make sure we've covered all the costs, covered all the things that, unforeseen things that, things that have come up in past from our past experience that we've run into, to make sure that we've got those things covered. And again, finally, to provide diagrams and the building design images for the Board of Ed and community use in presenting to the public. So that's kind of where we are right now. A lot of this is going to be happening in earnest once everyone's back from the holiday break. We're not taking a break. We're working through. We're getting our space program going and starting to come up with some thumbnail concept diagrams to really some underlying organizational concepts, so that we come back from the holidays, we're ready to sit to start talking about the nuts and bolts of how this building will start to take shape. And I don't know if I have anything you want to add, or Nick Macy with Arcadis.
Good evening. I just want to mention one point, that we will still be celebrating Christmas still. So, not to take away from Dan's great presentation, but I really love Christmas, and so does the staff. So we will be celebrating Christmas most weekend. No, I think just to add, a lot of this is obviously in the beginning during the Thanksgiving and during the Christmas season. We're trying to get obviously a jump start, and so we're really at the beginning stages of this. So it's not like we're way ahead. We're just giving you the map. It's kind of like giving directions. You got to have a good map in order to know where we're going to go. This is great directions that the architect, Fletcher Thompson, has provided. And so for the next few months, we're going to be doing that. Obviously, after Christmas, we're going to come back and be able to do all these work, so that we'll have the information so that we can present. Number one is a schedule. We got to put that, myself, the program manager, ONG, Ken, we'll be putting together a schedule, so you guys will know that. The Board of Education will know that. So I think it's really important to be able to emphasize that it's having the process in place to put together a great plan. But ultimately, everyone knows when we put the cost estimates together that there's some validity and there's some due diligence that's been done by us as the project team. So.
That's it? All right. Thank you very much. Any questions from the board? Peter?
How about opinion from the board?
Well, if you have any questions.
Well, I have some comments
Do you have
to,
any questions for the folks who
I have no questions, I have some comments towards Mr. Castanelli. For Mr. Castanelli.
Is there any questions for the folks who made the presentation? I guess I have what is your anticipated time schedule?
Right now, what you're seeing up here is probably 30 to 45 days. Gets us to the middle of February, the end of February.
And we'll have what at that time?
Conceptual design with some preliminary costs estimated.
Do you anticipate I'm not certain if we could go to referendum with preliminary cost data. Is that your estimation, or would we need more solid figures than that?
No, we'll have the solid figures, and I don't want to speak for.
I don't mean to hold you down to a day or a week, but I'm just
No, we'll have, by the time we're ready to present this to the community, there will be solid numbers on the design of the building that we've all sat around and worked through.
And that'll be, just some, at the end of February, March?
Middle of February.
Right. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Anyone else?
So will there be a point to weigh in on the conceptual designs? You've sort of taken community, we've talked about a lot of different ways of looking at arrangement on the site and in the building. So when does that feedback part happen?
In part B there, as we're developing the conceptual designs, we're going to continue to meet and present to the community. And so we will solicit feedback, continuing. It'll be continuous.
Tony?
When do you plan to start putting together your presentation for the towns?
Well, that would probably, as soon as we get it nailed, I'm sorry, Phil.
Not the nuts and bolts and building pictures, but why we're doing this, and the presentation is going to answer the questions that you get when you go to a forum.
Well, the charge that we've been given, as my firm has been given, is that we're taking and studying a new school on this campus, along with a cost estimate. So that's what our charge is right now. I'm not quite sure if that answers your question.
So who's doing the presentations?
We'll present to the community the designs. You're talking about for the referendum? We don't
Okay.
we're not,
All right.
we don't do referendum services.
All right.
Meaning, we don't sell to the community the project. We'll assist with the necessary materials and work with the Board of Ed and the community to give them the information that they're looking for.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you. Are you going to leave these boards here for folks to look at, or
Yes.
you need to take them? All right. Thank you very much.
Ken, before everybody leaves, I don't know if everyone has met Ken back there. Ken, many of us have really gotten used to seeing Patina from Arcadis, but now we have Nick from Arcadis and we have Ken from O&G, who are really our project manager, correct?
That's correct, yes.
So will you just talk about the role of the project manager so that the board has a good understanding of that?
All right, I'm going to let Nick start first, talk about Arcadis' role and how we're going to support that, because we really work for
Yeah, I
Arcadis.
think that's important for them to hear.
Great. So basically, we're like the orchestra conductor. So as we work with the design professional, we direct the operation to make sure that scope, similar to somebody that was at one of the meetings, I hope she's here.
Here.
Project management, which was scope, there she is, PMP, fellow PMP person. Managing the scope, the cost, and the schedule to make sure that these triple constraints are all kind of balanced. And so our role as project manager is really to manage that process. Obviously, we got to put together a baseline schedule, which again, we're giving you some arbitrary dates. Say, hey, yep, we haven't put that schedule together yet. We're going to be putting that together, so we'll have those dates nailed down on all these different deliverables. So unfortunately, Dan doesn't have the exact dates because we haven't put the schedule together. Because we're still picking out our Christmas stuff for our stockings. But so once we have that in place, then we'll be managing that process. One of the best benefits of having O&G is he's also, not Ken himself, building the buildings with his bare hands, but Ken also, his company, does provide construction management service. It has their own cost estimators in-house as well as Arcadis. So we're used to estimating our own projects. So we get the benefit of having a real builder, estimate the cost, look at some of the design details, review the constructability. That's a big word for making sure the building can be built within the design parameters, the way the details are shown. So we have that capability in-house with O&G and Arcadis. So we're basically managing that process, looking at some of the details, trying to make sure that everything that we put out as we assist with the designer in making sure that it's constructible, value engineering, looking at some of the components where we can have the best value at maybe a lower cost, but long-term, like what somebody's talking about, life cycle cost analysis of the materials that we utilize, so it lasts longer. So those are some of the things, and then let Ken kind of add on.
Thanks. When you asked that question about the cost and the estimate, most of the time during this process, this is when we determine what the town's going to go for a referendum amount. So it is, when you see a design from Fletcher Thompson, we'll have an estimate for that, because we've done more schools than anyone else in the state, so we have the data, we know what it's going to cost per square foot, whether it's an elementary school or high school, and we're able to take that information and apply it to your school. But also, what we do, we look at where they're going to build the building, to make sure, okay, is that the best spot? If you were to adjust, if you put it here, so we're not exporting a lot of material, we're not importing a lot of material. So we take all that into consideration, so when you have a good hard number for this project, you have everything. And that includes all your soft costs, everything in this project. So you get that extra set of eyes overseeing it, working with FT, working with Arcadis and us. So you have the best of both worlds. So when you go out to the referendum, that's what it's going to cost you. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Tony?
Well, I'm going to go back to the same question. Maybe I need to ask the board. Some buddies are gonna be out at these forums that we've talked about, at the various towns talking about the project. And you're gonna get a bunch of questions, and both financial and, this is great nuts and bolts stuff, but I mean, who's gonna answer the questions of why now, how come this way and that way, and what are the financial feedback, what's the payback, and all of those questions that are out there that are not the nuts and bolts. How is that being put together?
Let me just answer that just a little bit, not all of what you're asking, because I'm not sure I could. We'll be addressing, once we have the information of an actual building, that we could actually have a concept. So we now have a scope. Then we can put a schedule and a cost to that scope. Then you can develop what's called the tax cost, the cost of the taxpayer, and roll all that information. Without that, you can't have you gotta have nuts and bolts in order to build something, in order to give people the actual tax implications, which I just completed on another project for another small town that I'm working in. So I think, to answer your question, we don't have that answer now, because we don't have a design yet, in order for us to answer to the greater public of what that tax impact's gonna be. Is that the one portion of what you were asking? Or is there more to it?
But I think part of the issue is also, and I think Dan answered it a little bit, but didn't want to go all the way. You are definitely part of that plan of sharing the information,
Yes.
sharing the data with the public, standing in front of forums
Yes.
with board members, etc., myself.
Right.
The issue is that, though, you're not selling the project.
That's correct.
What you are doing is sharing the facts, the data. You're going to know from us, the educators, the principals, the teachers, why we're moving in this direction.
Right.
Looking at the long-term strategic plan. You're involved in that whole thing.
Right.
But I think what Dan was trying not to say was that he's not going to stand there and say, vote yes, vote no. He's just going to share the facts.
Correct.
From what you put together, the concept, the plan, the tax implications, etc.
Correct.
So I think that's what Tony is asking, and that includes, if I'm correct, pamphlets that may go out to parents
Right.
or community members with information,
Right. So-
and all of those things.
So like, for instance, the flyers we put together, recently I just finished putting the flyers together. The only difference is there was a group in the towns that we were working with that had developed and had put out their own flyer with vote yes, and they were selling the project. We could, by law, we
Right.
couldn't have that relationship. What we did is we provided factual information on the project so that they could use that information, but we could not connect ourselves to that, obviously, because it's statutory.
And that information is available to
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah.
So you can
So-
say vote yes or vote no.
Correct.
But your job is to present the nuts and bolts, the
Yeah.
facts of the project, and you will stand there and be able to say, this is because of this, and this is because of this, and
Absolutely.
connect the dots and answer the questions,
Absolutely.
and be part of it. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Correct, and once we have that information, obviously, the information that goes on the flyers and on to distribute throughout the towns comes from us also.
And that's where the planning comes in. That's what we're going to be doing, over the break and at the beginning of January, getting everything in place to know, we're going to have another meeting here, we're going to have meetings here, this is when we'll have public meetings, we're working backwards.
Mhm.
So we're working on it. That's why it was so important to do as much as we could before the holiday break, so that they could work on it, and so that when we got back January 2nd, we're off and running again.
Right.
I think Tony's question is, once the information is developed, if there's a need, and we have discussed this, if there are public forums presented in the towns, you folks will be a part of that.
Absolutely, and that was a specific item that we're planning on setting up so that we'll inform everybody by distribution of that.
Yes, I'd be presenting all the materials and the designs and how we got there, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
And then, obviously, there'll be more feedback. So this is the initial feedback. As we go through the process, there'll be some more feedback, questions and answers at those forums also.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for these folks? All right, thank you very much. All right. Item 7.2. Peter, do you have something?
Yeah, a couple of comments. I don't know how the board wants to discuss what's taken place. but I have my own opinion on what's taking place, and I don't know if you want to discuss that now and how other board members feel. My opinions are not always set in concrete. Sometimes the border hasn't set, but if you want to hear them, I'll express them.
It's up to you. This is item 7.2.
Okay. I was appalled at the meetings that were held in the three towns. In 1985, I sat at a meeting, a district meeting, in the high school, packed to the gills. At that meeting, the public directed the board what direction they wanted the board to head in. We have had no such meeting of any magnitude whatsoever. The three meetings that this company held at 7:30 at night during the winter produced less than 100 people when we have 6,500 to 7,000 taxpayers living in these three towns. If it wasn't for SOS, you probably would have had a handful of people in Bridgewater. I can tell you how I feel right now that the cart is before the horse. I haven't heard anybody in Washington, Connecticut have a significant opportunity in mass, in an auditorium, fixed with a packed house, expressing to us what direction they want us to head in. Most of these things have come from the building committees we put forth a number of months ago. There doesn't seem to be any overwhelming support because people don't know what the hell is going on. I had a cocktail party for 20 people. They have no idea what's going on. And why are we holding a meeting during the winter at night? Why shouldn't we have had a district hearing or a district meeting with a flyer going out to every member, all the voters, all the taxpayers, explaining to them in the generality that we need direction, this is what we're thinking. Here we're spending $143,000. You're not going to pass a referendum, I can tell you that right now. It isn't going anywhere. And we need to have a different approach. If we want to employ these people to do a presentation, they need to do it in this building, in that auditorium with a packed house. Otherwise, I think we're wasting our time. That's my honest opinion. You can debate it, you can say anything you want, but right now, the meetings that were held in these three towns, which I really don't approve of because no town can seat 100 or 200 people. We need a packed house. We need 400, 500, 600 people in that auditorium telling us whether they approve of the direction we're headed in or not. We haven't yet to have a meeting of that magnitude. We're taking the ball and we're running with it, which is good because that's the job of the Board of Ed, to a degree. But we have no overwhelming support for what we're doing. And to go forth with a referendum, and I see now that we're going to have to go back, I think, to what I proposed a while ago, that we're going to need overwhelming support to get any referendum passed. So we're spending a lot of money. And these people may do a wonderful job of presenting what it, but I've had no direction from anybody in Washington telling me this is what I should be doing. Nor Roxbury, nor Bridgewater. So I sat through this in 85, 86, 87. And here we are again. But I think we need, I don't know what approach we should have of putting it on the table, because it's just my opinion, it's not set in concrete. But I think we need to have a very serious discussion of what we're doing, because right now, we're dead in the water in Washington. Dead. I mean, real dead. When my wife, a school teacher, was appalled at the fact of seeing an article in the Voices with 5 or 6 people discussing a $39 million project, giving direction that, this is what we need, et cetera, et cetera. You can't do that. You can't do that. We need good public relations. And that means we've got to pack that auditorium with people. If these people are going to speak, you're going to speak, the superintendent, staff members. Everybody has to stand up in a forum and express their opinions before we get too far down the road and blow everything. Because that's where we're headed right now. We're not going to pass anything.
All right, thank you. Michelle?
I disagree with Pete with what your assessment of the meetings was for and where they are in this process. I think the long-range plan was sort of the process that got us to where we are. We did have a packed auditorium. We had actually so many meetings that I think people are really tired of coming to meetings. I think what the architects were doing was really trying to get a sense of the community about designing that building and what the community would look for in the plan that they were charged to work on. And it's a school building. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, most of the things that need to go into it. And they're going to come back and with some ideas. There's plenty of room for input. It wasn't the time for everyone to be discussing the project, the concept of the referendum. We've been doing that for 2 years, basically, in this long-range planning process. So I think the point of those meetings was for them to gather information about the building, not about the referendum project as a whole. And it sounds like they were able to gather enough to get started, and they'll come back to us with their concepts, and then the community's going to get to weigh in again on those concepts. So there is time for more involvement. But I do think that I for one did not go to any of those meetings. I've been to so many of the meetings. I think a lot of people have, and I think we're not going to. We have to be careful trying to continuously meet and try to continuously get the entire community out over and over and over and over. So as long as we can move forward and then have something to present, something new to present to them, then I think the community will come back and give us their input.
Good.
Pete, I understand, your desire to move forward on the project and to move it down the road, but I think you're expecting the resolution in the first act. And whether it be a play or a novel, you don't end up at the point, you're at the point where you're exploring characters, you're introducing characters, and you want the resolution of the conflict before you even put it out on the board. I mean, I understand you're excited to get forward with it, but I think you are actually putting the cart before the horse, because you want the resolution before you have the study and before you have a plan presented. And you really can't fill a room with people to have a touchy-feely focus group. What you want are groups of people to sit down and talk. They're gathering information, and you fill a room full of people, and they're going to say, what's the plan? And then they're going to say, well, we really don't know what the plan is. We're working on the plan. We want to know what you think of the plan. And before you know it, you're going to have fatigue. That's not the way the process is going. I think you need to let it play out more. I think we need to see what happens next. I think we need to see what they come back with, and I think we will see that there's a process here. The other thing I would point out is, Pete, what happened when you were looking at this thing the last time and you had the auditoriums filled with people? Did you solve the school problems and create a situation in which you solved all those problems and moved forward?
The public directed the Board of Ed to do what it wanted the Board of Ed to do. Had the board, and I was a supporter of it.
Pete,
the Board of Ed didn't do what the people said, it would have lost the referendum.
But Pete, the point is, you had a process then. It's a different process from the process now. And I think that you need to let the process play out, and you need to see where it is. It's the end result that matters, where you end up. It's not where you start, it's where you end up. And I think if you focus on the beginning, then you've got the wrong metric, and you won't understand where you're going. And I just think you have to let it play.
Yes.
I think what I'm hearing you say, Pete, and I agree with you, that I think it's really important to get the information out there to everybody. I think you need to build momentum. I also think you need to create an environment where you allow people to feel comfortable sharing what they think. Sometimes it's best to do that in smaller groups and then slowly build the momentum. So I think that the way that we're doing this is going to unfold, and it's a process that will eventually pack an auditorium where people will have lots of opinions. But I think that sometimes being able to create smaller spaces and venues, allowing people to communicate how they envision their school, makes it more personal, so people are feeling heard. But I'm with you, because I think that it's very important that Washington is part of that process, which is why I think it's important that Washington Primary School be a place where families can speak as well as Chapag, Burnham, and Booth. So I'm on board with you on that. But I think that is momentum that they're building, and I think that it's slowly going to get to where you want it to be.
Anyone else, Susan?
Well, insofar as the public guiding the board, I will remind everyone that during the long-range planning process, it was the pre-K 2 3-5 split between Booth and Burnham that got the most votes in the long-range planning process, and that went nowhere. So that I looked at as, people were trying to give some direction, what would be most agreeable. That's not the direction that we're currently finding ourselves in, and that's the quagmire that that is sort of staggering the process.
Yeah, I think your analogy about plays and novels is good, but I think Pete wants a short story, which we can get to the resolution of sooner. We're in a situation where we're looking for as much input as possible, but we're also apparently looking for momentum, which is good. But we're in a kind of a tricky situation because Chairman Hirschfeld has just said that this referendum question can't be one question, but it's two questions. And of those questions, when we're talking about carts and horses, Pete and I have been going back and forth with this in our non-setting concrete way about what cart should come first. And as Sue said, if we've ignored one source of information and are creating momentum with our cart in one direction, and spending money on that, now learning that we don't have to go in that direction if we have to have a separate referendum question anyway that will spare us further expense and time. I mean, I'm not sure we already have a contract with the three companies that we have in the room with us. We already have a contract with them. So I'm not sure how that goes. But it seems to me that as far as cutting things short and having a short story and finding out literal and important community input, we could have a referendum question about the changing of the regional plan in as little, I think, as 60 days from the moment this board decides to have that referendum question. And depending on how that goes, if we need to have our teams working on the momentum at the same time, it appears that our question as to a final number, we have to have 60 days after we get a final number as far as bond council for a referendum, I believe, maybe 30. But we're looking at a referendum, and maybe they'll be able to tell us the difference. We're looking at a referendum, the end of February, let's say 1st of March, we get a final number. We're looking at a referendum in May, interestingly, probably coinciding with our school budget. That'll be fun, and have all that together. So we could probably cut to the quick and within 2 months of today have a referendum on the horse issue before we not build the cart, but build the plans for the cart. And that is simply to have a referendum that says, and I'd like to make a motion, that we hold a referendum to decide this issue that says, shall the Regional School District Number 12 plan, as approved by the State Board of Education on May 11, 1967, be amended by deleting the term elementary grades, kindergarten through 5th grade, to remain in their present hometown schools, and inserting in its place the district consolidated elementary grades, kindergarten through 5th grade, into a single elementary school to be located on the existing Chappaqua campus.
Second.
Thank you. So if we determine that question will either clear the trail for this cart, or it will render it unnecessary, and we'll have to go back to the drawing board for a different cart that we want to build in this region for our kids, or work on the carts we already have. So we have a motion on the floor.
Well, as a point of order, I think this issue has already been decided by the Board of Ed. We had voted on this, I believe you and Susan were both in the minority. Therefore, I don't think you get to raise it again. That's my recollection. think as a point of order, I think the motion is out of order, but I'll hear from anyone else. Greg?
Table it. I don't think it's in order either, but I'll move to table it.
Oh, on the, you came up with very new and very important information and relevant information regarding putting another referendum, whether or not a referendum without money, a dollar figure more as an advisement. That's huge and that's new. That can't possibly make that motion out of order in light of new evidence.
Hold on.
I've moved to table it, so.
Is there a second to the motion to table?
Second.
All right, the motion to table is not discussable. All those in favor of the motion to table, raise your hand.
It's not discussable?
No.
Not debatable.
Not debatable.
Motion to table is not
The
debatable.
reason I'm going to vote for the motion is, oh, go ahead. This is in favor of the motion to table Alan's motion to set a referendum date. Peter, I'm sorry.
It's gonna take a minute. Tell me, is your hand up or down? Pete, your hands. So, okay.
You got them. All those opposed, raise your hand. To the motion to table.
Alan, your hand up. 4.
Okay. Any abstentions? What's the vote?
7 in favor, 4 opposed.
All right, Alan's motion is tabled. All right, anything further? Kelly?
I was not in attendance the evening that that vote was taken, so I'd like to make a motion that we hold a referendum. And would you like me to read Alan's verbiage?
It was just made, the motion was made and there was a motion to table, which was passed.
I know that, but it was based upon the fact that you mentioned that people who had brought the motion up and who lost the vote could not read.
Well, point of order, Mr. Chairman, you cannot bring up that motion again at this session. It's been tabled.
That's not why it was.
Has to be removed.
If I had insisted on that position, that Alan could not make that motion, I would have ruled the motion out of order. Instead, there was a motion to table it, which passed. So I think your motion to raise the exact same question that was just tabled is out of order. So I'm not going to allow that motion, Kelly. Is there anything else?
Question.
Yes.
So what are you proposing as chairman a referendum will consist of in the future?
Well, it's not my decision as chairman as to what the referendum should
Well,
consist
let's
of.
get your opinion. Why not? What is the referendum going to consist of to get us off the block?
I anticipate the referendum will consist of 2 questions to be voted on at the same time. Shall the regional plan be amended? And shall a project consisting of construction of a new
Well, I
building?
think that satisfies what Alan is proposing, except it'll have an extra question. You'll have to vote yes for the first one before you can vote yes for the second one.
But you vote at the same time.
Right, so what's the difference?
Right, well,
This satisfies both contingencies of the board. I mean, the referendum that will be proposed will satisfy everybody. You'll be able to vote yes or no, to go forward, to vote yes or no. Well, you wouldn't have to vote on the second proposal if you vote no on the first proposal.
You can vote on both, even if you vote no. If the first, if the
So
motion to amend the region fails, that's the end of it.
That's the end of it.
Yeah.
But that satisfies.
That doesn't mean you can't vote at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
Is there any other discussion? Yeah.
I like to point out that according to the Supreme Court ruling, even if, there are 2 questions, and even if the towns approve the funding, somehow strangely enough, as we were just saying, if you vote yes on the dollar figure, but vote no on the regional amendment, the no wins. So why don't we just cut to the chase? Why do we want to have this happen?
Point of order, Mr. Chairman, this has been discussed, it's been tabled, it's off the agenda. We need to move on
We
to the next item.
we have voted on this. It's been raised and we decided we wanted to present.
We have a change, but we don't.
We don't have a change.
You know.
Mr.
We
Chairman?
wanted to present an informed decision to the voters. That's what's been decided by the board. Yes, sir.
If you could just clarify, because your explanation earlier indicated that there were two different sets of voters
Yes.
eligible to vote. Changing the referendum are the
Changing the
registered
regional
voters.
plan.
Changing the regional plan, that's the registered voters. Anything having to do with monies attached to that, any taxpayer who's a registered voter.
Correct. That's how it's been explained to me.
So they can still be tagged together even though there's two separate
Two separate ballots. Yes.
ballots, but two separate sets of
Two separate questions.
potential voters,
Yes.
eligible voters.
Correct. So when you walk in and you went to the registrar, you'd have to show whether you were a resident or a taxpayer, and if you were both, you'd get two ballots. And if you were just a resident but not a taxpayer, or I guess just a taxpayer but not a resident, you'd get only one ballot.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
is it also true that to change the regional plan according to the Supreme Court decision, you need a majority in all three towns?
Yes.
But not for the funding, is that correct? The funding, like we do the budget, anything that has to do with funding is only a majority of the total of three towns.
No, I don't want to, I'm not the board's attorney. I believe that's correct. But
Thank you.
anything else? All right. I'm going to have to look into the issue, the motion that Alan raised. It's been tabled. All right, moving on then to item 8.1, old business. Second reading, policy, Michelle or Alan?
All right, 1331, smoke-free environment. This is a second reading of a policy that we approved at our last meeting. If you look at the last paragraph, the line out is the amendment that was made to the first reading. So we just wanted that to be reflected here. If it passes tonight as amended at the first reading, then that will be completely stricken. That won't show up in the policy.
All right, is there a motion to approve 1331 as amended for a second reading? All right. Any second? It's been seconded by Jen. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of approving policy 1331, smoke-free environment as amended for a second reading of the board, say aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? Any abstain? All right, next is the one that was added to the agenda.
Yep, the one that was added to the agenda, 5131.65, smoking cessation policy. That is a policy that is being proposed to be removed from our policy book. It has not been in practice for years. So we're doing some housekeeping and removing it from the policy manual. And since there's no precedent for this, we're just treating it as any other policy change has been treated in the past.
All right.
Yeah, which requires, as I said,
We
there's
voted
nothing.
previously as a first reading to
Yes.
delete the smoking cessation policy.
We did.
Is there a motion to approve the deletion of 5131.65?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Emily? Any further discussion? All those in favor of deleting 5131.65, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, it passes. Thank you. Item 9, opportunity for the public to comment on agenda items. Is there anyone who'd like to address us?
Would you say that a little louder, please?
I said, is there anyone who would like to address us? If you would, just come up, state your name and what town you're from, please.
Oh, Joe, you go first.
My name is Joe Buckheit, and I'm from the town of Bridgewater. I've been a program manager for more than 40 years. I would be embarrassed to get up here and present to you what was just presented to you, especially fumbling the very simple questions that you asked about schedule. You have a contract, you have deliverables against that contract. Where are those? Those should be right in front of you, Mr. Chairman. your contract guy, whoever wrote that thing, should have it right in front of you. That's not mysterious. If I presented something like this to you as a retired Army colonel, I would have been fired. So you should have a list of the deliverables in front of you. And up here, instead of whatever this is, should have been the project schedule. Against that project schedule, they should have shown you when they're going to deliver the budget. Because you're the one who's paying the bills. It should be firmly listed on a project schedule. And it's not. So I think we're wasting our money, but that's up to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Julie Stewart from Bridgewater. Just two things. One is on the vote. It's my understanding that if you have a vote in which you're addressing two different groups of people, one would be registered voters and one would be taxpayers, that according to our registrars, you'd require 2 separate spaces, 2 separate moderators, 2 separate staffs. And I know the town of Bridgewater would find that to be somewhat of a hardship because we don't have that many people trained and staffed up to do all that. So that's something I think you should look into before you plan to do it all on the same day. And secondly, just as a big picture comment, you know, I think my daughter was in elementary school when I started on the long-range planning process, and now she's in 7th grade. And it's getting depressing. And I wish, really wish the board could spend their time on curriculum and education and not on worrying about buildings. And I can tell you that I can look at the 1,700 voters in Bridgewater and I know how the majority of them will vote. I really do. And it's just not going to pass in our town. So I wish we could just get this over with. When the selectmen came in May, they said do it. They gave you a proposal. You all agreed to do it back in May. And I still have your letter, Jim, that you wrote saying we would do it and it'd be done. And here we are, December. And now we're looking at next May. So it's really, I have to say, as a public servant, it's getting depressing. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Bridget Buckheit Carney. I am also a Bridgewatonian. And by record in past, I am a project management professional. I am a lean practitioner. I am a lean Six Sigma black belt. I am Train the Trainer certified in both just-in-time and total quality management. I come with a considerable amount of program management experience. I'm very concerned about what has been put in front of us from a perspective of $150,000 to find out that the emperor has no clothes. I'm concerned that there is no baseline schedule, that there are no milestones, that there are no cost estimates, and that the information here, whatever this is supposed to be, is problematic at best. When I look at things like community informational input meetings, there's no identity to how many, the allotted time, the necessary participation. If I, as a project manager, had put this forward, as my father has said before him, I would have been fired. When I think about the things that they're talking about here, that they touted as a best practice, for example, a strong community feel, and you have less than 1% of the 6,500 residents making these decisions and coming to these meetings, I would say it would be out of order for you to move forward. So I would request that this be reviewed in a way that is respectful to all the communities and not just the largest community. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, thank you. Next item on our agenda is executive session. Is there a vote to go into executive session for the discussion of negotiations, strategies, and consideration of potential settlement for the 2014-2017 SVEA contract?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we go into executive session for the purpose of so doing.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor of going into executive session say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? You abstained. I attest. Yes. Take a 5-minute break.
Okay.